front. But meantime, we've been tracking the way that farmers continue to grapple with supply issues on the meat front, as well as some other fronts there, as we see prices for eggs continue to skyrocket, along with pork and beef prices. I want to bring on our next guest who has more data on that, as well as the pain being experienced by farmers on the front lines, one of the largest lenders in the agriculture space. Brian Philpot is CEO of AgAmerica Lending, and he joins us right now. And Brian, you've been looking into and investigating the price increases that we've seen. What have you seen play out, and why are we seeing such a marked increase in prices for a lot of these commodities?
Yeah, I think part of it is where we have a backlog with meat prices. We've had a backlog with meat prices, and we saw them drop significantly there, over a month ago. And here over the last, let's call it 2-3 weeks, we've seen some of the logistical issues get cleared up. I think we've got some more certainty. And we had some pretty big purchases here over the last 2 weeks with China. We've been, of course, apprehensive, wondering what amount of purchases that they're going to stick to with the agreement they made a few months back. But we've been seeing here the last few weeks significant purchases in soybeans, wheat, and of course in pork. They were decimated in their hog herd was decimated last year, and they've got a long ways to build that back up.
Yeah, as you noted in your most recent report, egg futures tripling when you look at that, 94 cents in the beginning of March before this all kind of broke out. Start of April, wholesale beef prices jumping 8% this week. Consumers, though, I mean, that's one of the things when you look at prices in store, consumers paying 28% more for ground chuck compared to this time last year. So when you break all this out, it does seem interesting to see the prices that farmers are getting for their product versus what you're seeing play out in the grocery store for a lot of Americans. So what are you attributing that gap to in the changes that we're seeing on those fronts?
Yeah, the gap. I think that there's a number of theories related to that. One is demand by the consumer. The U.S. government is investigating the prices by the slaughterhouses and the prices by the slaughterhouses and the retailers. But I think the biggest thing is it's a supply and demand thing. And with these slaughterhouses having to shut down, these production facilities having to shut down, you've got a backlog in animals. And as you mentioned earlier, they're having to euthanize a large number of the hog herd, the chickens out there. And our clients who own cattle are having just to continue to hold them until prices return.
Hey, Brian.
And just to add on to that, I think the big issue there in talking about these prices, do you feel like food is, we've got fundamental problems in demand, and I don't think anybody feels like food, we've got that long-term problems in food demand, but we have issues as it relates to supply chain. We've got issues related to labor. We've got issues related to these production facilities. And as we start to normalize there, we're starting to see a return to prices, more normalized prices.
Brian, it's Heidi Chung here. Just a quick question. Do you think that the U.S. government now is doing enough for the agricultural sector? And if not, what more can the government do here?
Yeah, before all of this, net farm income was supposed to be about $92 billion this year, and there's estimates that losses up to this point are somewhere between a third to half of that. The CARES Act came through with about $19 billion. We've heard reports that the next bill that comes through may have upwards of $50 billion in there, but I think the long and the short of it is that no, not yet, not to make up for the losses that we have. Farmers did, you look at the last decade, farmers did really well the first 5 years, but over the last 5 have been a lot of headwinds leading up the last 2 with China, and liquidity is half of what it was at the beginning of the decade. So I think it's important that we focus, the government focus on the farmers and what they're looking at, and depending upon what weather happens with weather this year and how this thing continues to roll out, we need to keep our eye on that. We certainly don't want this turning into a long-term food supply issue.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on Heidi's question with one more there. When we look at the compared 19 billion in government funding that will be supposedly coming to farmers on that front, we've heard President Trump hyping up the way that he's the friendliest president to farmers since all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. Of course, other people would push back on that and say, look, well, you're kind of just off-putting the pain that you impacted on farmers because of the China trade deal problems there. What would you say has been his impact on the farming industry here over the last 4 years and what we're seeing play out right now?
Yeah, I think farmers, not all, but a large number of farmers supported the president as it related to his election. I think a number of them probably support him as it related to his strategy toward China. And from the agricultural community, I think that it was they had lost enough battles. They were ready for someone to fight a war. I think the question is now, was it worth it? Right? I wonder that question. I have wondered that question, and it'll be interesting politically how that plays out. But I think being in agriculture the last 20 years, it's become such a global market, and these farmers living in these local communities sometimes don't feel like the policies being espoused in Washington and elsewhere are representing them. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out politically. And, I'm not going to opine on
all right. Well,
the full extent of your questions, Zach. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate what you are able to say, Brian. I appreciate that. Brian Philpot, AgAmerica Lending CEO. Appreciate the time, sir.
Appreciate it.